everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week. My name is Cammy Bell. I'm your host as always, and I've got a special delight for you all this week as I am joined by our pod regular over on our Patreon site, Iain Campbell. Iain, thank you very much for joining me, my friend. Good to have you on extra.
Thanks very much, Cammy. Delighted to be on. As the sun is shining across Scotland at the moment, it looks like spring has finally sprung.
Yeah, true. It's always the running in joke with the people I work with, because I'm like the only person who works up in Scotland within my kind of immediate team, is they're all talking about sunshine and beer garden weather, and I'm up here. It's grim. Like we had snow the other night, and people just can't believe it, but they can believe it because it's Scotland. But as you say, the sun is out at the moment, so let's just enjoy that, and
Absolutely.
let's hope it's a nice sunny weekend as well as we return to Ibrox against Aberdeen on Sunday.
Yes, and it's
It's Saturday. When
Saturday,
I'm
yeah.
losing a day. I'm losing a day. My apologies. Yeah. So I'm so Ian, I'm so used to the kickoff time's been amended, and I knew that the weekend's time had been amended. I've just put it back 24 hours. That's on my calendar. I apologise, everyone. It is definitely Saturday, close to Saturday evening as well. So definitely Saturday. I'm not breaking news here.
Yeah, bit of a strange kick-off time, but I think David mentioned it on the update earlier this week that it is dictated by the TV. Unfortunately, that's just how it is in the modern game, and unfortunately, you just have to go on with it. But I don't think I've ever been to. I remember the old 5:35 kickoffs back in the day of Satanta Sports, but I don't ever recall there being a quarter to six kickoff. I don't think I've ever been to anything like that. So yeah, it's going to be certainly unique. I think not getting home until about the back of 8 on Saturday after being to the football. But there you go.
Yeah, true. And I remember the good old days of 6:05 kickoffs, even for old firms, if people can believe it. But those days are long gone. Ian, we're going to talk about Aberdeen in due course, and we also took some questions from our chief exec subscribers over on our Patreon site, which I'm keen to put to you and pick your brains about as well. But I just want to do a quick recap of last weekend's game against St Mirren over in the Simsa Stadium. A fast flowing festival of football. It was not.
Hmm.
I think it's fair to say. But listen, 3 points is all that mattered. And Rangers were able to go there. We historically, I don't think, have ever really played well in Paisley. It seems to be a thing for us. With Hearts dropping points on the Saturday, Celtic, after what appears to have been a couple of contentious decisions, were able to beat Motherwell. The pressure was on Rangers to be able to make sure that we could capitalise on that Hearts defeat and get us to within 3 points, and we duly did. But at times it was a hard slog. I think Rangers were never out of control, but there was times where I think we just felt the energy and the quality levels had dipped a wee bit.
Yeah, I think you could describe it if you were wanting to use a term or a turn of phrase. You could describe it as a functional victory. I think that's the best way to kind of think of it. I think when we seen the starting lineup, I think everybody looked at it and thought, look, that's the team that we would go with. It was. Let's not make any mistake about it, Cammy. There was pressure to get a result. You're right. We've never really played that. We don't often go to Paisley and give St Mirren an absolute tanking. It just hasn't happened over recent years. Obviously slightly different for St Mirren as well because of the departure of Stephen Robinson, which we'll come on to talk about. Obviously now taking up the manager's position at Aberdeen, but certainly with a caretaker in there, you don't know what you're going to get. I think we talked about it myself, Stephen and Kev, on the preview, where we didn't think the caretaker manager, Craig McLeish, would deviate very far from what Stephen Robinson had in the past. I think it's fair to say that St Mirren were a little bit timid, is maybe the word. They were still physical, but certainly I think they'd set out to try and get a point. So therein lies the problem when you've got an issue like that, which happens within the league. I'm not going to shy away from it or be critical of it, but each manager's got to set out their team to try and achieve a result. So, we have to then go and break down teams, which we have struggled with in the past. We know that. It's something I'm sure the manager's working on hard to try and crack, and we'll be looking at, obviously, coming into the summer recruitment. I'm sure we'll be looking at players that can unlock those keys. Definitely trying to break down tighter defences. But, I thought throughout the game, I thought we did control. I didn't think there was a time when you could turn around and say we weren't in control of the game. Obviously, when you get to the latter stage of the game, Cammy, you know what it's like. It can be squeaky bum time. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of scar tissue as Rangers supporters that we've had these problems in the past where we've seen late goals conceded. But listen, we were in there. It was a really well taken goal, I thought, by Tour Romans, who I think if you were to take all the January signings in isolation, you would say he's been the most successful. Certainly, I know he's had fitness issues. That's been pretty evident, but he is becoming, I think we talked about him. I think you christened him with quite a good nickname, which escapes me at the minute, Cammy, but I'm sure you'll tell me. But
The
Robin,
Ibrox Fox.
the Ibrox Fox, that's it. Yep. But he's been incredibly consistent since he's come into the side, and he's now, you can see he's got that defensive side to his game. He's got that edge. We knew from the figures he had from his time, obviously, in Belgium, that his attacking stats were right up there as well, and that's something we've obviously identified. But he's got that defensive quality to his game as well. But it's a delicious ball in from Nico Raskin. It's pinpoint because he spots. If you watch it back, you watch the highlights again, you see that Nico spots him, can see him ghosting in at the back post. St Mirren just switch off, and it's a really good finish. And the way he takes the ball, if you watch it, it actually wrong foots the keeper. Shamal George is probably one of the better keepers within the top flight in Scotland, and it completely wrong foots him. But it was a great finish. You want to try and build from there on in, but listen, these games can be quite stuffy. But yeah, to get out of Paisley with 3 points under our belt, and what was, I said, a pressure situation with Hearts obviously dropping points the night before when they went down to play Kilmarnock, then to get out of there with 3 points and keep ourselves in contention was all you can ask for.
Yeah, true. And a well fought result. I do like that terminology, by the way, functional result, which was certainly true when we saw the game unfold. And it could have been a wee bit easier for us, Ian. And I'm going to continue my trend of weekly moans about poor officiating when Alexander Gogic appeared to have a handball decision that I think we have put firmly in the camp of seen them given, most recently against Dujon Stelling in the Old Firm game. Now, anyone who listens to me in the Patreon site, I'd said this in the post match, said it in Simon's show, the Roundtable. I hate the rule. I absolutely despise the rule. I think it's done nothing but cause confusion amongst everyone in the game, players, officials, most importantly, fans, pundits, whomever. No one seems to get it. It absolutely needs tidied up. But if we're calling Sterling's handball a penalty or a dog show or whatever, however you want to be able to classify it, whether or not you're talking about red cards or whether or not you're talking about penalties being given, whatever you're saying at that stage, the Gogic one will be now. What I will say is that we're recording this pretty late on in Thursday afternoon, and there are rumours circulating at the moment that the most recent VAR review show that's yet to come out. I wanted to try and see if it would have come out before we started recording. Sadly, I didn't catch it. May come out and say that a penalty should have been awarded. Now, the reason as to why I bring this up is because I think it needs clarity. I'm not suggesting for a single minute we're going to change that law before the end of the season, because that's obviously ridiculous. But what I'm saying is, if Rangers had drawn or dropped points in any capacity in Paisley on Sunday, a lot more would have been made about in that decision. Now, given what's happened after the quarter-final, Ian, I don't think Rangers can really flood the world with too many statements at the moment. In normal circumstances, if that quarter-final hadn't happened with so much focus and everything else as well, I would have liked Rangers to have been able to come out and say, we don't understand the inconsistency of officiating at the moment. You can't come out and say, I don't like the law, right? You can't come out and say, I don't like it. But what you can do is come out and say, there is an inconsistency with how this law is being applied across the top officials. And the common sense element that runs through me would almost be encouraging the SFA via Willie Collum or whomever to come out and say, this is more clarity that we can give on this law as it stands at the moment. When we get to the end of the season, it's scrapped. Trust me, nobody will be happier than I will. But there's a number of instances. If you look at the Dundee Derby, the penalty that was given against Murray, that's never a penalty in your life. However, penalties awarded. So the Gogic one for us, I don't understand as to how it was even a review. I don't understand as to why the referee wasn't called over to the monitor, because I think it's worth being able to say that there has to be another set of eyes on that from the man who makes the decisions. VAR can make recommendations. It can't make the decision.
I think that's wherein lies the issue, Cammy, because there's two prongs in this discussion point to me. One, you talked about consistency, which you're 100% bang on the money. And it's ironic that obviously a decision's given in the Dundee derby, which is almost a carbon copy. In fact, to the point where the ball's actually moving away from goal when it deflects onto Murray's arm. It's not going near the goal, whereas an instance with us, it's a goal bound shot. It's potentially going to go towards the goal, so it's potentially going to score a goal. And the consistency issue is, where does that come from? That's got to come from, right, well, let's break it down and be honest about it. It's got to come from the SFA and the head of referees. So they all get the referees together at the beginning of the season. They say, right, okay, this is now going to be the interpretation by the IFAB are saying in terms of the rules via UEFA, FIFA, and the various associations. They have to make a decision and be clear on it and say, right, okay, this is what we're going to constitute as a handball, therefore a penalty decision. We've seen it earlier on in the season with Lewis Mayo at Kelly. The ball bounces up off his leg and deflects onto his arm, but the decision's got to give a penalty, which it shouldn't be because we're told at the beginning of the season it won't be a penalty. So there's a complete lack of consistency from the top of refereeing within this country in terms of what is deemed to be a penalty handball offence within 18-yard box. And as I say, the irony of ironies is that our game's obviously played at 12, and then you have the Dundee derby on at 2 o'clock. And almost identical, within certain degrees of incidents, a different decisions given by two different referees. Now, it comes down to the referee's interpretation, but also, as you mentioned, their VAR, which we'll come on to in a second. The person who's monitoring VAR, and there's two people, there's one on VAR and there's assistant VAR ref, they have to then surely, if the VAR referee thinks, by the way, that's not worth looking at, the second opinion, that's why there's two of them. There's got to be a variable opinion to say, no, I think we should look at that. It's ridiculous it wasn't looked at. And if it had been a game changing decision, and there have been instances of that this season and last season where we've had, Column's come out, he's done his little YouTube show and he said, right, okay, that should have been a penalty. Within the context of the league this season, these could be, championship defining seasons. Decisions. And the fact that, I think you're right. I think after recent events over the last 10 days or 12 days, the club aren't in a position to come out and start, as you say, start piling out statements. Privately, I'm pretty sure they'll be like, right, okay, we need to be putting a bit of pressure on here, which I'm sure they will be. And I think in the fullness of time, it will come out and it will be spoken about as well. I think the manager will speak about it more as well in his post-match. I think he will talk about it. The manager at times needs to have that certain neutrality because he will be pulled in front of the beaks in inverted commas. But at the same time, I think he will come out and speak about it. The second point is VAR, and I know there's been a bit of discussion across the network on our Patreon site as regards VAR and where it sits within Scottish football. My opinion's clear on this. VAR isn't going to go away. It is now part of the professional game. Scotland can't go and do away with it, but it needs investment, and it's two things within it. We need to have the right equipment. We have the equipment that's going to make a difference. So that's got to come from sponsors, potentially from the clubs. And secondly, the people that operate it. There needs to be a change in terms of it. You see that there should be, in my opinion, I think this would work. You're obviously a trained referee, Cammy, so you can tell me if I'm barking up the wrong tree here. But you could have someone who's specialised within VAR. So their role within the game, within the professional game in Scotland, within the top flight, is that they are VAR officials. So therefore, they're spending more time with the monitoring equipment, they're spending more time researching, they're spending more time being trained, and therefore their role within it is to have VAR decision. Then you have your frontline referees, your frontline linesmen, your fourth officials, etc. So you can start to tier it and say, right, okay, more experienced officials, you can have them within the VAR confines. Whereas at the moment, what we've got is we've got a merry-go-round, sorry, not a roundabout, a merry-go-round where you've got somebody referees a game 1 week. I'll take an example, right, just off the top of my head. David Dickinson, he's refereeing a game 1 week up in Aberdeen. Aberdeen play St Mirren on a Wednesday night. The following Saturday, he's a VAR official. So you're then asking a referee to then come in. And I get what people will say. The counter argument would be, yeah, but they're live and they're existing referees. But they're not specialised within that part of the game. And I think VAR is such a specialised part of refereeing. It is good at what, see, VAR, it works if it's applied properly. We've seen it when it was first introduced in international tournaments. It's worked well. And it's interesting, it's come up in the news today. I've seen it on Sky Sports today, that UEFA are going to get the top leagues together in the close season to talk about how they implement VAR correctly, because each league's got a slightly different interpretation. That's obviously now been recognised by the governing body, and they want to get together and say, right, okay, we need to have a consistent set of guidelines we apply right across Europe. We've seen it as well in our Europa League runs. I think it's quite clear that VAR was being used slightly differently within the Europa League than it was being used within our domestic league. So there needs to be consistency from that viewpoint as well. But it's not going to go away, but we need to rethink how it works. And clearly, these decisions could, as I say, especially in this season, they could be league defining.
Well, it's interesting you say that because we do have a Scottish VAR manager who's Martin Atkinson, and he oversees VAR as part of his remit within the SFA. He was a top referee down in England, so you may recognise his name. But what I thought was interesting, Ian, because I did read an article on this earlier in the week, where it almost feels as if this is Willie Collum coming back out, uh, or he's launching a kind of a preemptive strike, if you will, where he talks about the VAR use and the importance of VAR, and talking about Martin Atkinson himself. This is a direct quote. He's openly said that the scrutiny within the west of Scotland, looking at some sinister reasons behind decision, is much far worse than anything he's been able to see in England. So yeah, I think, as per usual, Willie Collum trying to cover his own arse when it comes to not addressing the key issue, which I think you've mentioned, and I agree all of with it, but fundamentally it boils down to one key point: make referees professional and improve the standard of officiating. That's it. That's it. That's exactly it. Okay, cool. Well, now my wee rant is over. Let's head over to some CEO questions, Ian. And as I said, we got these from the chief execs on our Patreon site. If you aren't on our Patreon site, please feel free to jump over. There are loads of different membership tiers. However, there are unique benefits for our top tiers for our chief execs as well, and this is one of them. Loose Wardrobe kicks us off here, and he says, now that Rangers have called for an independent review into the quarterfinal against Celtic regarding ticket allocation, policing, safety plans, behaviour of both sets of fans, etc., what actually happens now? Do we have to sit and wait for the SFA, Police Scotland and Celtic to come forward and agree with our proposal? Will this investigation or review ever happen? Or will we likely go weeks or months with radio silence before the Scottish Government come up with the offensive behaviour at Football Act 2.0 and the SFA slap us with a fine? What more can the club do to be in the front foot on this matter? And I'm going to tie this into a later question that we're going to get asked, but taking that question at face value to now, Ian, I think what the club have to do is that they have to continue to bang that drum. I won't, cover again all of the fallout from the quarterfinal, but the simple fact is that an independent review would answer a lot of those questions. Now, on face value, based from the SFA's position, the Old Firm game is the crown jewel of the national game, right? And if you are a non-Old Firm fan listening to this, I completely get the idea that you might think the Edinburgh Derby, the Dundee Derby, if that's more aligned to you, is bigger. But let's talk real world here. The Old Firm games are what pull in the TV money, as such as us. And so the SFA, if they were trying to be transparent, and please no laughing at the back, but if they were trying to be transparent, then they should be they should join Rangers, and I don't really care if Celtic come into it or not, but they should be joining Rangers into this. If Police Scotland have got nothing to hide, they should be calling for it. Now, what I am concerned about, Ian, is that I think the only ones who will benefit out of the back of this would be Rangers, and so therefore there'll be a sentiment amongst SFA, Police Scotland, etc., to not necessarily go down that line. Now, I think we spoke about before, and I know there's been a number of conversations on this subject where I think that Rangers can hold their hands up and say, from a planning perspective, we got it wrong. But Rangers seem to be the only ones who are willing to be able to make that concession. Police Scotland came out on the offensive, and then the SFA followed suit, and then even the government got involved in it with John Swinney not being able to understand as to why neither Old Firm club made a statement until much later on in the week. I don't understand as to why John Swinney needs a statement to be able to try and come out, because there's no point making a statement for statement's sake. And whatever Rangers had said, it was going to get scrutinised. So taking due diligence to be able to formulate a statement that covers all areas, which I think it did, by the way. I thought it was an excellent statement from Rangers. I think was the correct thing to do. Not reply or respond or react to the clamour coming publicly about just releasing a statement. It was about being able to say, well, there are bigger issues at play here. And as a result of this, if anyone is hesitant towards an independent inquiry, I would genuinely want to understand their motives behind that. All Rangers can do is continue to bang the drum at the moment. They can't force a hand, and I think that is a problem. And I think the SFA and Police Scotland, who have got skin in this game, I think it's going to come back to, no, we're not interested in that because we don't want any fingers pointed at us.
They can't shy away from it, and the club will continue to push. It's about engagement to me, Cammy, and I think when we talk about the Scottish Football Association, we're one of the founder members. The SFA are there, and they have the jurisdiction over professional football in this country, amateur football, youth football. They are there as the umbrella organisation to serve people who are engaged within football. And Rangers Football Club are one of them. They're a member of it, one of the founding members of the Scottish Football Association. Let's never forget that. So they need to come out. The SFA must engage with this process. Police Scotland must engage with this process. We live in a day and age at the moment where finger pointing just seems to be carte blanche. It's right. Well, it wasn't our fault. I thought the statement by the club was, I think I agree with you, it was well thought out, it was well judged, it was well structured, it addressed the issues that are there. It didn't apportion or try to shy away from any blame, and I think Rangers have been, they've fronted up to that and said, look, yep, we have made a couple of mistakes in the build up to that. We shouldn't have, we shouldn't have changed some of the security arrangements. We should have kept it as is, as it's been in previous times that Celtic have come to Ibrox. So we've fronted up, the club have fronted up and went, look, we made an error, but there's other things in there that need to be looked into as well. Remember that we play the police for this. This isn't this isn't something the taxpayer pays for. The club have to pay to have that level of policing at a game of that stature. As you quite rightly said, Cammy, it was the jewel in the crown within Scottish football. And again, as you quite rightly said, it is at the top of the tree, and you're never going to get away from that. So, it does come at a cost to the club as well. It comes at a cost because of what's involved in terms of the policing. It comes at a cost in what's involved in the stewarding, and it comes at a cost what happens when fans damage the stadium, as we've seen within that. And I'll just kind of drop it in, Cammy, because we talked before we started recording. I was at Ibrox today in an official capacity through my employer, and I was talking to my liaison there, and we were actually out having a look at the stand. The Broomlawn is looking back to its usual self. I'm happy to report it's looking in good nick. The graffiti's gone, the stickers have been removed. When I spoke to my liaison, I said, is everything going to be up and running? She's like, I know there's been rumours. She's like, the Broomlawn will be ready. Obviously, the electronic advertising boards were being fitted when I was there earlier on this morning as well. So just to allay any kind of fears, it'll be good to go for the game come Aberdeen. But the club just need to continue.
Electronic boards, I do want to make a point of this.
Yep.
Electronic boards that had to be replaced,
Yes.
not repaired.
Yep.
So those were damaged beyond reparation.
Yep. So again, that's a cost that's coming as well, but that's a cost that will obviously have to flow down the line to those that are involved in. They're involved in the damage as well, which I'm sure it will be, but therein that becomes part of the engagement process as we've talked about. So all the parties that are involved, and I know you said there obviously about Celtic, we're looking at it through our prism as Rangers fans, they have to be involved in it as well. And their statement that came out, last week, it shied away from anything. It was one paragraph and it was 5 paragraphs about the Green Brigade getting back into Parkhead. We're not interested in that. We want to talk about the here and now. So all the parties are involved, all the stakeholders, which they are, have to be involved in it. The club will continue to push it, in my opinion. I think at the moment we're allowing things to settle. I think the club are going down the right trajectory, allowing things to settle. We've got a lot of things going on the park at the moment as well. So that's obviously, we're involved in a title race at the moment. The victory on Sunday and Paisley keeps us in that. So I'm sure the club will be very conscious of that as well. They don't want to distract away from what's going on in the park. But, I am very confident that the club will be pushing in the background to have the engagement there. And it has to be an independent inquiry because it has to happen. We have to find out where the fault lies. And the club have put their hand up. They've said, look, there is issues there. The SFA need to come out and clarify why they pushed for the whole of the Broomlawn. That needs to be looked at as well because, I can't confirm this, but what I've heard and from various sources is that they were threatening to take the club to court if they denied it. They had to give that percentage. So again, the club, we can go back and say, look, you forced us into this position, but the SFA need to come out and, they're there to serve the member clubs. And it does. We're very cynical when we look at it because we've seen things back in. I'm a child of the 80s and 90s and started going to the football then. When the SFA was a cabal, it was the Blazers who went on jollies with a national team. But at the end of the day, it's there to serve the entirety of football within Scotland. They must be part of the process and need to take due responsibility, as do the police. At the end of the day, they are a public body. They're funded by public money. As I said, the club paid for the policing and have to pay for it, but they also need to be held accountable. But everybody needs to come round the table in that independent inquiry and not have it drag out over months. And we're sitting this time next year, Cammy, and we're saying, "Oh, has that inquiry started yet?" It needs to be done now, because when you're talking about the Premier Showcase game within Scotland, and it all comes down to TV money, and that brings money into the game, not only from the professional game, but as I talked about earlier, going through the amateur leagues, going through the junior leagues into like youth football, that money flows down. So it's vital to football within Scotland. So it needs to be addressed. The inquiry needs to happen, but it needs to happen within a pertinent time frame.
Well, I'll tie that into the question I kind of made reference to earlier on, Ian, and this comes from Jason Allen, and he said, "What should we expect or demand from our new CEO, Jim Gillespie?" Jim Gillespie obviously hasn't in role yet, but is this part of the CEO remit to your mind in terms of being able to continue driving this narrative forward, even if it's about as welcome as a fart in a spacesuit with some of these other bodies that you're talking about?
I think so, and I think the fact that the club have decided to hire Jim Gillespie, that he's got experience within Scottish football. I've known people who worked for Jim in the past. They've got mixed opinions on him, but one thing they do say about him is that he's forthright. So I don't think he'll shy away from it. I think obviously the club have went through a process of appointing him. They've wanted somebody who's been engaged within Scottish football, and obviously his time at St Mirren, he's been engaged with the authorities there as well. So I think he's in a good and strong position for us as a club to go on the front foot. And I think that's what we want to see from a CEO. We want to see the person who's going to stand up for the club in terms of, this example that we've got just now, obviously with what happened after the cup game. There needs to be action taken on it as well. That action, we don't know what it'll be in terms of allocations. We don't know how it affect us potentially going to Parkhead after the split. But his role will be to defend the interests of the club, put the best interests of the club forward. And obviously, the time that we've had our new ownership since last year, I think we've began to see that the chairman he's learned on the job. He's picked that up very quickly. I think Andrew Kavanagh, that he's learned that, we talked about it, I think, going back at before Christmas, that I don't think he or the other part of the 49ers enterprises realised what Rangers are in terms of football club and institution. Didn't realise how passionate people in Scotland are about the game as well. So I think he's learned really quickly on the job. I think this appointment of Jim Gillespie is a sign of that as well, that he's taken someone who has been heavily involved within the game, comes from a professional background in terms of his previous experience, Jim Gillespie, and he can apply that for the club as well. So I think very much as a fan base, we'll want to see the CEO go on the front foot, really defend the club from the beginning, and make waves. And, at the end of the day, you want to be, as member clubs, be making changes that benefit the game. We can talk about this till the cows come home. I think in my lifetime, Rangers will always play in Scotland, and I'm in my mid-40s. I don't think that's ever going to change. So the reality is we are where we are, and we want to try to make the game in Scotland better, for generations to come as well, and attract those young fans to the game, because, we're in a situation where we're potentially losing a generation of fans to the EPL, but we don't want that to happen. So to engage within the various organisations, be it the SFA, the SPFL, and make positive changes within the game as well. We tend to do a thing that's very parochially Scottish, that we always tend to look at the negative. And we're all guilty of it. If anybody's been brought up in Scotland, it's just a very Scottish trait. But there is positive things within the game in Scotland, and the Premier game within that as well at the top of the tree is the crowning achievement, as you've said. So yeah, I think we'll see that. I'm really confident we'll see it from Jim Gillespie, that he'll be engaged and defend the club and the club's interest, but also be a part of a bigger change within Scottish football as well. And but I think we'll start to see that come to fruition. Maybe 6 to 12 months when he's been in position.
Yes, he is going to be coming in to a job which I think has got a lot of responsibilities to it, which we all know, but also how he continues to drive that position forward on behalf of Rangers will be interesting to see develop. Let's move on to John McLeavy. He says, Cammy, hope you're well. How do we approach each of our games before the split? Is it a case of like last Sunday, just get 3 points any way possible? Do you think we need a lead going into the split, or would you be confident we can go to Tynecastle and the Piggery to get results? And we think we could go there to get results, but I worry more about away to Falkirk. And if we end up away to Hibs or Motherwell after the split, what's your thoughts? A lead going into the split would be dreamland for me, I think, Ian.
Absolutely.
I think the challenge is the challenge I think for me is twofold. To answer John's question really bluntly, I couldn't care less if it's the worst 8 games of football I'm going to watch for the rest of my life, as long as we win them. I think that there's going to be so many ups and downs in terms of this. All 3 teams involved going to head for the title, that it's going to be impossible to predict how we can react or how we can step onto the front foot. I think this Rangers team suffers a little bit from scoreboard pressure, and I don't mean that from a perspective of we've been on top and then therefore we can see other teams coming after us. I just think though that for me the big concern around this is how well this Rangers team plays with a steadfast belief that it can win the league.
I think you've hit the nail right on the head. I think there needs to be a belief within the group. We've had various conversations across the network and on our Patreon site and the various shows that are on there and the ones that I obviously are part of in the preview and the roundtable about mentality and a winning mentality and having that within the core ethos of the group that you think you can go on and win this. I'd like to think it's there, Cammy, and it's for a couple of reasons. There's several players within the squad whose time is coming to an end with us. We know at the end of the season, you can talk about Nico will be away after the World Cup. There's question marks over whether Tav's going to get a new contract. I don't think he will. I think he'll depart from the club and have a testimonial, which he rightly should, for his time in service with us. But how do they want to be remembered when they leave the club? What do they want to have within there? There's players that are going to be here next year that I think have been bought for next season. I think Tour Romans, I think Tucci Chukawani have been brought in for next season. There's players that are on loan who are going to depart as well. But from their time with the club, what do they actually want to show for their endeavours? Dial it back. I know, and I'm not going to touch on it because I know it caused people don't want to talk about it, but I know Russell Martin's been on in the media recently talking about his time at the club. Dial back and think the last time we played St Mirren and Paisley, with all the hullabaloo that surrounded it that day with Hamza Agaman and the result, and obviously Russell Martin departed not that long after, would we have been in a position where, today's the 19th of March and we're talking about being in a 3-horse title race? Any of us would have turned around and looked at you and just went, don't be so silly. We're not going to drag ourselves back into it. We have. The manager has. Has it been perfect? No. Does a manager still make mistakes? Yes. We know that. We can see that. I think he's learning on the job. I think you've said it a couple of times, Cammy, that the manager is learning, I think, every game. The hope is he'll learn from his mistakes. But the squad need to believe that they can go and get this. I think it's there. My own opinion is I think Hearts wobble has started. I think they will wobble. I think in terms of the games that we've got coming up, I think it is a tough running. I think the split will be tough as well, but Motherwell are going to have a big influence on this. I think, in my opinion as well, those games are going to be vital. I thought they were unfortunate against Celtic. I thought if they just played with a little bit more guile, then they could have got a result from that or taken points, but they're still going to have a material influence on it as well. So to go into the split with a lead would be great. That's going to be dependent on other results. Now, if you look at the run of games that we've got coming up, I've got the game against Aberdeen. We've got was it 3 to the split, if I'm not mistaken, because we've got the international break in between.
So we've got Aberdeen at Ibrox,
Yep.
Dundee United at Ibrox at the beginning of
Falkirk
April,
away.
and then
Yep.
we're away to Falkirk the following week.
All 3 games are winnable. All 3 games are winnable, and we need to go in with that mindset prior to the split as well. The international break kind of lands at a funny time because it's you've only got one more game after the split, before the split, sorry, I should say. So I think all 3 games are winnable. The manager will certainly look on paper and think, they're winnable. The squad need to have that belief and say, if we can go into this, get, maximum points, then we put ourselves in a position, because I think Hearts will wobble again. That's my own opinion. You look at Celtic's potential fixtures, I think they're away from home twice, if I'm not mistaken. There's going to be twists and turns in this. I can't predict. I don't think any of us could predict and turn around and say how things are going to work out. Obviously, we hope it ends in a positive fashion for us, because I think the prize that is there at the end of it, not just the glory and the kudos of winning the league, from where we were this season, would be incredible. What a turnaround. But at the same time, the financial reward that comes with it, and obviously entry into the Premier competition within Europe, which I'm sure most of our listeners are aware of. There's a lot of changes within the coefficient. Unfortunately, our great run in 2022 and what it did to boost European competition for the top flight of Scottish football is slowly dwindling. And these kind of entries into the Champions League are going to start to be far and few between, and it's going to be tougher for us to go and sit and dine at the top table in Europe. So if we can achieve that this season and be straight, get that Premier competition, Champions League next season, then we're in a good place. But yeah, we need to have the belief. The manager, I'm sure, will have. I'm sure his backroom staff will have as well. We need the whole team to believe that they can go on and win this.
Well, that kind of leans very nicely into our next question, which comes from Dave Fleming. Dave, thank you for sending this in. It said, why are we not more excited about being only 3 points behind with 8 games to go? Have we been burned too many times before? And Ian, yeah, I've got to be honest with you. I think what you've just kind of covered there probably sums up where I'm at. And I kind of understand. I'm not suggesting Dave thinks this, but obviously I think he does make a great point in terms of saying, we probably have been burned too many times before. But when you take the whole context of the season, as you've just done, and the end of the Russell Martin era, how we could be able to recover it is nothing short of miraculous. What Danny Rule has been able to do, and I've mentioned before, I think that we need to look at that and listen. The peak phrase that you can always talk about with Rangers fans is, we'll always say, "What have you done for me lately?" And although we've had that recovery sprint and we've been able to get back into near the top of the table, and now we're 3 points off the top of the table, I think that there's an element in there, and I'm sorry for using this phrase because long-term listeners will be, ticking off the cliches here. But I think what we've seen in the most recent run of games, Easter Road, Fir Park, Livingston, etc., is the scar tissue from those games, which then, for me at least, bled into Paisley, and we got a result in Paisley, which I think we worked to do, to earn. And for me, it's never going to be about us being able to play high energy, foot to the floor football for, well, back at that point, 9 games left, because we simply don't have the squad that would be able to see that out. I've mentioned before in other shows, I think that he's got maybe 13, 14, 15 players that I think right now we can steadfastly rely on, and after that it's slim pickings.
Yeah.
Those players are not going to be able. I mean, well, I say they're not going to be able. I think it's an incredibly, incredibly tall order for you to be able to then say, well, those players can give it to me for the next 720 minutes of football for the rest of this league, because it's too big an ask. So right now, as things stand, I think that the reason as to why we struggle to get excited for it is, for me personally, sometimes it's the hope that kills you, even though I want to be optimistic with things. But at the same point, it's probably the track that's been walked already, and the path that's been walked already shows that this Rangers team can struggle at times in games where it should be relatively straightforward for us.
And that therein lies the key issue, because we've seen the inconsistent. And to use a running analogy, you talked about the sprint that's been done to get us back into contention. You're now at the stage where you're in a marathon, so you have to show the stamina, you have to have the consistency to get results. I agree with you. It's the hope that kills you, and I'm exactly the same, because I want to be in a position as a fan where I'm going, do you know what? I'm really excited about this. This could go either way, but we all go to football because of the adrenaline we get from it, supporting our team and being there for the fantastic and glorious moments that you get, which your fantastic football club is more than renowned for. But it's the whole thing that clicks in the back of your head and goes, I don't know if he can. I agree with you. I think the manager has got a core of 13 to 14 players that you'll see in his starting 11 from now until the end of, at least until the split, because obviously we've got the international break in between, and you can't discount these people might be injured when they're away on international duty, but hopefully that's not the case. But I think, as you said, when he turns to the bench and looks and says, right, okay, what else have I got on the bench, then you're looking at saying, right, that's a struggle. It is a struggle. Yeah, I think he's going to have faith within that core of the players as well. He'll be looking to build upon that next season, but in the here and now, he's got to put out a team where he says, I can trust you. Now, the great example of that is obviously Nasser Dija keeping his place at the expense of John Souttar. The manager's recognised the dip in form and said, okay, I have to steady this year. And he's done the right thing. I don't think MD would deny that. Now, I say that as a fan of John Souttar, but since he's come back from that injury, his form's just fell right off the cliff, and we've seen it in the quarter final. He came on and he made the team feel nervous, and that's the last thing you need in the second half of extra time within a knockout competition. So I think the manager's been pragmatic in his choices. I think he'll continue to be. I think Saturday will be a big barometer, Cammy. I think if we can get, and I'm confident we will, a result against Aberdeen and have that belief, I think going into the remaining 2 games before the split, you'll start to see the momentum build. Now that might be in twine with other results as well from our nearest competitors in Hearts and Celtic. So if either of them drop points and we continue to get positive results, you'll start to see a little bit more kind of belief coming in as well. But there's always that lingering 5% at the back of your head as a fan going, I've seen this before, I've seen inconsistencies, I know what can happen here. Let's hope we can eliminate that over the next 3 games starting on Saturday and get those positive results in, because that would put the fan base into a positive mindset again.
Yeah, very true, very true. And I will absolutely put myself on record with saying this, Ian, that whilst I don't think that we have seen an overabundance of quality across the course of the season from any team, but I do want to give credit to obviously Hearts in terms of what they've been able to achieve this season, and I think Motherwell have been a very good team to watch. The Old Firm, I think in particular, have absolutely been through the ringer in terms of how they have performed, and so I genuinely don't believe the quality has been the best. Now, I absolutely hope it's not the case, but if we are sitting here and Hearts have won the league at the end of the season, then I give them credit for winning the marathon, as you say. But what I will say is, irrespective of what's happened up to this point, you're going to have to give credit to a team that's able to see out this sustained period and be able to get to the end of the season by being able to realise that actually you're in a 3-leg or a 3-horse race. And I think you have to give that team credit,
Yeah,
unless it's Celtic, in which case I don't. Um, right, let's move on, and we'll take the next one from Scott Mackay. And it says, why oh why do we take centre and play it back to Jack Butland, who then horses it up the park and either goes straight to an opposition player or we're battling for a 50-50 every single time. We are starting with the ball halfway up the pitch. Why not try and keep it and build something another half instead of this nonsense? I know it seems trendy, but it doesn't work for us. I've yet to see us do something positive from it that results in a goal or even a chance. It boils my I can't say the word that he used. It boils my wee every time, and I rant about it to my son every game. I can just see young Mackay Jr. there like that, rolling his eyes, going, "Oh, my dad's going off in one again." Get used to it, Mackay Jr. It's what happens. Thank you for that question, Scott. Yeah, it absolutely does my head in as well. I suppose tactically, Ian, you could say maybe that the idea is that rather than taking the ball at centre and then getting your players 20 or 30 yards up the park within a couple of seconds, actually what you're doing is you're playing it back to the keeper to allow the team to get forward, and then he obviously distributes it from there. But the point is valid. We're either losing the ball or we're losing the 50-50 if someone has to take a touch in it. I don't really see it. I mean, I don't want to get down like the rugby route where effectively what we should be doing is kicking it out near the corner flag and try and get as far up the park as we can. But it seems like this is just about being able to try and gain territory in the opposition's half from the kickoff. It is trendy. I've seen other teams do it. I haven't watched enough football where it's happened, where I can see where a team's had out and out success with it. It seems to me anytime I've seen it, it's a very similar story to what we see. Um, I would like to think that we might be addressing that, maybe doing a wee bit of variety going forward.
I think
I don't
so.
know.
I get why it's done. I get the idea behind it, that you're allowing, as you said, the ball comes back, it allows the team to set, and then you're trying to gain a bit of territory. See the points you brought in there. I'll address both of them because it's something that I've talked about on the various group chats that we're on. It, the way that we give the ball away at times is highly frustrating because we don't have to. We're trying difficult passes. We're trying the good example there that the question came from, where why are you giving the ball away so soon? You need to win the football back to go and score a goal. So, Graham Souness famously said possession football, it is 9/10 of the game, which it is, but you still need to score goals. But if you've got the ball, A, you can create an opportunity, and B, the opposition can't score because you've got the football. So, yeah, you want to see that in terms of retaining the ball and not giving it away, which we've done so cheaply over numerous games. I think if you look at some of the away games recently, you look at the performance at Livingston, we just kept giving the ball away. The second point that the question asks is the 50-50s. Second balls are vital within football. Anticipation of where the ball's going to go. And it's a little bit like people talk about snooker players can think 3 or 4 moves ahead. It's the same within any professional team sport as well. You need to be thinking to yourself and saying, right, where's that ball potentially going to land? You'll hear it if you played any level of football where, you'll get the shout, don't follow the ball, follow the man. Anticipate where the ball's going to go. We're not great at that at the moment. I think that's something the manager will need to work on going forward, hopefully within the short term. That, we go for a 50-50 ball, we're anticipating where the ball's going to go. It's like a passing move. If you've got a player gets the ball and then moves into space, they're looking to give the person in possession of the ball the option. It's the same when you come to a 50-50. You need to be mapping out in your head. And professional players will do this. They're in their sleep. You say, right, okay, the ball might land there, it might land there, it might go to him, it might go to him. Where do I need to be within that to try and win the ball back? And it is a skill. It's a skill that can be coached. It's a skill that can be taught. But we just need the players to be better with it as well. Retain possession, look to win your 50-50s and your challenges, win the ball back. The quicker you win the ball back, the quicker you're going to go up the field to the opposition goal.
Yeah, very true, very true. I do like it. Sometimes I think when we get too immersed in some of the tactical nuances of it as well, I think sometimes we can overcomplicate it. The final question I'm going to cover, and I did want to mention about this as well, it comes from Neil Buchanan. And Neil asks, do you have any insight into the Cornelius situation? Another who thought life here would be a doddle and then didn't fancy the physicality and number of games at his age. The short answer, Neil, is no, I have no insight into the Cornelius situation. There was rumours going about that he was training with the youths. I genuinely have no idea what's happened with it. I don't even want to speculate on it. I do think that in previous experiences, whenever that's happened, there may be a question around the relationship between the manager and the player, and something may have went awry there. But I cannot speak to that with any confidence. What I do think is interesting is that he got injured in November playing for Canada, hasn't played a game since, hasn't kicked a football since, and he's just made the Canada squad for the upcoming international break.
I think that might, and again, I'm not going to speculate. We're not here to speculate because we don't know the facts. But if I was looking at it and logically, I would think the fact that he's decided to go with Canada after coming back from such a long injury and being named in the Canada squad, obviously with the World Cup coming up, it's going to be on his mind that he wants to be in there. And I get that from a player's viewpoint, but maybe the manager is saying, look, I don't want you to go on these friendlies because potentially in the month of May, I'm going to need you. Potentially, sorry, April and May, I'm going to need you within the squad. He's maybe said, well, no, I'm sorry, my international career means more to me. He is only a lone player. We've seen it in the past. For those that can remember when Craig Moore went to play and captain the Socceroos in the Olympics, it led to a very, let's just say it wasn't pleasant with the manager at the time as well. So there can be that. You're always going to have that element of international versus domestic and where do your priorities lie. I think that's the most likely explanation. If he's fit and he plays for Canada, then we know he's fit and available for selection for his club side, which is currently us. He's obviously still registered as a Marseille player. He's only on loan. So that might have been a discussion between us and Marseille and the player where we said, look, we don't want you to go on international duty, but he's made the decision to do it. I don't know enough in terms of is there powers that the club can block that. I don't believe that there is. I think when it comes to international competition,
No, you can't.
You can't do it. No. So if they decide to go and play for their country, at the end of the day, you're powerless. You can't do anything. So it might be an element of that, Cammy. It might well be. It might be that the manager feels as if he's not going to contribute anything to the first team in the short term. So to regain his fitness, I might be spinning something here in my head and saying it's negative. It might not be. The manager might say, look, I want you to go and train away from the first team because if you're engaging with the first team at the moment and we're being combative to a degree within training, it could aggravate your injury. If you go and train and concentrate on your fitness, a level that's below where we're at with the first team is going to benefit you in the long term. Could be, might not be. We just don't know, Cammy.
Yeah, do you know what's interesting about that though? I'm going to boil it down to probably something that's incredibly simple. He probably doesn't want to risk his World Cup place.
Yeah.
So I think if he does, and we know, Ian, that fitness and match fitness are two very different things. But if he declares himself as fit and he wants to take the opportunity to go and to feature in the friendlies, and then obviously keep himself within the sphere of the World Cup squad, which I think he will go to the World Cup. I get it. He's not going to do it again. So, why not take the opportunity? I know that people have been kind of talking about, from things I've read online around, yeah, he got injured and he's not really played. And, as a result of that, we don't really miss him. It's an option. with Marseille, so therefore it's not an obligation. We're not tied to anything. And so I think that I'd be very surprised if he does play for Rangers again. But again, we will have to see what happens. Let's finish up, Iain, with talking about the return to Ibrox on Saturday with the visit of Aberdeen. It's 8 cup finals, as Danny Rule had mentioned, that we've got from now until the end of the season. We've already won one of those cup finals against St Mirren. We have another one against Aberdeen. We have got concerns, I think, valid concerns about where we are from our away performances. We haven't been, out and out hitting for 6 at home either, but fundamentally, every team that's going for this league title has to win their home games. It's an absolute must. And I think Rangers, of the 3 games that we've got remaining, I think, as you rightly said earlier on, are winnable. But as things stand to now, I think that this is probably going to be the one that will present the most challenges. You mentioned earlier on, Stephen Robinson obviously has recently joined Aberdeen. I think they drew 1-0 with Falkirk in his first game. They were leading, and I think they drew. However, we know the history with Aberdeen. We know that their fans will be down and wanting to be able to try and revel in it as best they possibly can. It is their cup final every single time they play Rangers, but ultimately we need to ignore a lot of that noise and just focus on ourselves.
Yeah, and I think Stephen Robinson is did brilliantly at St Mirren. You can't deny it. Obviously, he's brought them a League Cup. Two seasons on the trot. I think top 6 finishing. Obviously played within European competition for the first time since 1987 for the club. So you can't deny he's been successful within having a limited budget. He's went to Aberdeen. He's going to have more money. I do believe he'll be back in the summer. I think he'll have money to spend. I think he'll come in and look to steady the ship this season. They're in that funny position where top 6 is unattainable. Really, the reality of it is they're not going to do it mathematically. I'd need to look at the table to see if it is possible. They're not going to make it. He's going to want to come in and steady the ship. One thing I will say about Aberdeen is their most influential midfielder that they've had over the last 6 or 7 games is ineligible because he's our player in Lyle Cameron. I've watched a bit of Aberdeen. He has been massive for them, despite the fact he obviously went there on loan. Was decried by the majority of their fans, but he's been pivotal in Aberdeen at the moment. And in terms of not results, but in terms of performances and driving, the engine within that, certainly within the midfield as well. So obviously he'll be missing because he's ineligible. But I think Stephen Robinson will come into town on Saturday, and he's going to make Aberdeen very difficult to beat. I wouldn't be shocked if they look to play on the break. I think that's what they will do. If you look at what they've got, the talent they've got within the team, that's a team that hasn't performed this season. That cost Jimmy Thelen his job, clearly. They've had this strange, prolonged period of nearly 3 months with their caretaker and Peter leaving. Some kind of bizarre going on with the director of football as well. But I don't think Stephen Robinson was their first choice. I've got a couple of friends and I play football with that are Aberdeen fans, and they're of the opinion that he wasn't really going to be the first choice, but they've made the decision to go down the domestic route. And obviously Alan Burrows knows him from his time in Motherwell, so there's the connection that's there as well. But I think Stephen Robinson will come in, he'll be pragmatic, and he'll make them very difficult to beat. So therein lies the issue that we've kind of talked about earlier on in the show, that we need to find a way to, pick our way through that, pick our way through the old low block, as we call it, and a defensive setup as well. So that'll be the main challenge for the player and the managers on Saturday. They won't come into town being cavalier, Cammy. I just don't think that'll happen. He's too clever for that, Stephen Robinson, in terms of his knowledge of the game. He'll know what we've got in terms of an attacking capacity, the pace that we've got up top, and the ability that has to do damage to teams as well. So he will come in. I'm sure he'll be very pragmatic and conservative in his approach. And at the end of the day, they're not us because we've got to go and get the 3 points. But really good players in that Aberdeen side. I don't think there's any denial of it, but they haven't performed this season, and let's hope they don't start performing on Saturday.
Yes, that's very true. That's very true. We need to make sure that we take the game to them, which I'm sure Rangers will, and I'm going to be very excited to be able to watch that. I might even sneak in a wee pre-match pint just purely because it's a late kick-off. Who knows? Who knows, Ian? That's the gamble you take. But if you enjoy a gamble, then why not join in with the Rangers Youth Development Company's Big Blue Jackpot? Heart and Hand is delighted to be sponsored by the RYDC. Profit from their products help support the Rangers Youth Programme, and congratulations to Kenneth Cooper, who has very recently won RYDC's Big Blue jackpot of £16,290 recently. Over 18s can play, and you can be a winner like Kenneth and so many other Rangers fans very soon. The more tickets sold, the bigger the prize will be, and all profit goes to the Rangers Academy. To date, RYDC have donated more than £12.5 million. Visit rydc.co.uk for full details on the products and how to sign up for the Rangers Lotto. Thank you to our producers in London, Mike Lee and Paul Myers. Thank you to you all for listening. Thank you to our chief executive subscribers for some great questions there, which I hope that you've enjoyed Ian and I talking about. But yeah, as I say, some great comments and questions in there from them. And if you say wish to join them, head on over to patreon.com/heartandhand. My last thanks for this week on Extra goes to Ian. If you want to listen tomorrow on Ian, obviously you can head on over. He's on the roundtable, he's on the preview. What else are you on, Ian? Go and remind me before I forget.
A couple of things. Sometimes I pop up on RBR now and then, so I think I'm going to be. I might be doing RBR with Jack and Colin again in the near future. So I've pitched it to Jack, and we're just coming up with an idea. So I might be appearing on there on a Friday morning.
Well, I wish you the best of luck with those two. Thank you to you all for listening. David will be back on Flagship to unpack the game against Aberdeen, and I will be back next week as we look. Sorry, I beg your pardon. I'll be back next week. Might do something a bit different as we head into the international break. We will see what happens. But thank you all for listening. Ian, thanks so much again for joining me.
Thanks, Cammy. It's always a pleasure to talk Rangers with you.
Thank you, and we'll speak to you again on Monday, folks. Bye-bye for now.